Hi there, this is Jonathan Ginsberg. I'd like to talk to you today about debts that will survive your Chapter 13 bankruptcy. And as you know, Chapter 13 is the kind of bankruptcy that is essentially a payment plan. And what that means is that you are taking usually about 5 years, you're proposing a payment plan to your creditors and to the trustee and the judge, where you say, I'm going to deal with all this debt. But yet some debts will still survive even the Chapter 13 discharge, because normally after discharge, every debt that's been addressed is now resolved. It's now paid off, considered paid in full. It's no longer collectible, and it's been taken care of. So for example, if you go into a Chapter 13 and propose to pay your unsecured credit card debts at 20 cents on the dollar, if you get through to discharge in your Chapter 13, then the 80% that was basically discharged or not paid in the Chapter 13 is forever discharged. The 20% will resolve your will completely resolve your obligation to that credit card company. Now, mortgage debts will survive bankruptcy, and the reason for that is that mortgages typically are paid over 20 or 30 years, and so any debt that is more than 5 years to pay off, you're not going to pay a 30 years worth of mortgage in a 5-year Chapter 13 plan. You could. The problem is your monthly payment is going to be astronomical, plus you're paying the trustee a fee on all the money that goes to the trustee's office. It doesn't make a lot of sense. So what you do typically with Chapter 13 is you may pay the mortgage arrearage, the missed payments, as part of the 13, but the ongoing payments you pay directly, and then the unpaid balance of your mortgage is continue to be paid afterwards. You do not discharge that debt. Again, it is paid directly to the creditor during the term of your plan. Same with a vehicle lease. That is something that is paid directly. Technically, that's an unsecured debt, but that is paid directly. You don't typically include that in your Chapter 13 payment. Student loans are kind of a unique hybrid because in one respect, student loan debt is an unsecured debt, but most of the time, but you cannot pay it less than 100%, with rare exception, in a Chapter 13. So the problem you run into is if you go into a Chapter 13, you're paying your unsecureds at 20 cents on the dollar, and you propose to pay your student loan at 20 cents on the dollar, then after you get out of bankruptcy, you might have this huge arrearage plus the accrued interest, and you'd be in default, and all kind of nasty stuff happens. So many bankruptcy courts, in the Northern District of Georgia in particular, lets you pay your student loan debt directly outside of your plan, and then after you're done with your Chapter 13, you're not in default, you continue to make your student loan payments, the debt survives the bankruptcy. Again, student loans, there's a lot of unique rules about student loans, and if you've got them, definitely call me, because there's a bunch of different things we can do with student loans now that might make bankruptcy less attractive, or even in addition to bankruptcy. Another category of debt that could survive bankruptcy is a CoSign debt. Again, let's get back to the situation where you have credit card debt, you're paying your unsecured debt in your Chapter 13 plan at 20 cents on the dollar. What happens to the other 80%? Well, if you have a cosigner, the cosigner is going to get stuck with that balance after your bankruptcy is over. It'll be discharged as to you, but your bankruptcy is not going to discharge your cosigner's debt. So in some cases, we'll set a special class of payment. We'll pay a cosign debt 100 cents on the dollar, even if we're paying unsecured debt at 20 cents on the dollar or 30 cents, because we want to make sure we pay the cosign debt so it does not survive bankruptcy. But if we don't do that, then it would survive the bankruptcy, or the creditor could file what's called a motion for relief from co-debtor stay and pursue the co-debtor. So bottom line is, if you have co-debtors, if you have somebody that co-signed a loan for you, that's a unique situation that you really need to discuss with me so we can make sure that we make specific arrangements for it in your Chapter 13. So those are a few areas. There's another area that can survive bankruptcy, and that would be unlisted debt. If you left something off, many cases it's going to survive bankruptcy, although not all cases. Again, fact by fact pattern. It depends on whether you know what the debt was for, whether it was intentional, that sort of thing. But I would not assume that if you don't include something, it's going to be discharged in your Chapter 13, that it very well may survive it. And my motto is no surprises. You don't want to come out of Chapter 13 and find that you've got all this debt that you didn't list or that survived the bankruptcy case. It kind of defeats the purpose. So again, that's another reason why when you're preparing your bankruptcy case, let's get a credit report. Let's make sure we include everything so we can address everything. Make this a once-in-a-lifetime occurrence so that your Chapter 13 gets you back on a good track for your finances, and it solves your problems once and for all. You don't have things that kind of linger on after your bankruptcy is over. So I hope this has been helpful. Again, my name is Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm a bankruptcy lawyer here in Atlanta. Any questions, feel free to give my office a call. Thanks a lot.